Welcome back to Legal Luminaries, brought to you by the American Association for Paralegal Education, your guiding light in the realm of paralegal scholarship and practice. As we delve into Episode 2, our dedicated hosts are joined by a distinguished guest to unravel the intricacies of the paralegal world, offering invaluable insights into the profession's evolving landscape. This episode is a deep dive into the essence of paralegal education and the continuous journey of professional development, with our guest sharing enriching experiences from the legal field. Together, they explore the significance of adapting to technological changes, the critical role of ongoing learning, and the personal journeys that shape a legal career. The conversation takes a meaningful turn towards the well-being of legal professionals, emphasizing the importance of mental health and a supportive work environment. Our hosts and guest discuss practical strategies to foster a culture of care within the legal community, underscoring the need for holistic approaches to legal practice. From the visionary perspectives of our hosts and guests to the shared experiences that highlight the value of education and diverse representation in the field, this episode is a compelling narrative of passion, resilience, and the pursuit of excellence in the paralegal profession. You're about to embark on a journey through the challenges and triumphs of the paralegal world, where each story shared is a step towards enriching the tapestry of legal education and practice. This is Legal Luminaries. Welcome to episode number 2.
Welcome back. We are excited for today's interview in celebration of Women's History Month. AFP's podcast, Legal Luminaries, shines a spotlight on the insights, trends, and voices shaping the future of the paralegal education and legal profession. Legal Luminaries is designed to connect you with thought leaders, innovators, and trailblazers in the legal field. We would like to extend a big thank you to Doug Lusk and the National Society for Legal Technology for our post-production work on the podcast. With me today is my co-host and fellow paralegal educator, Kelly Radnathy. And our guest today is Judge Rohani Zapanta, a bench officer for the San Diego Superior Court. We welcome Judge Zapanta, but before I turn the mic over to her, I have the great privilege of actually knowing Judge Zapanta's inspiring story and her pathway to the law. And I wanted to set the stage and tone for our conversation today. This past Saturday, I had the wonderful opportunity to volunteer as a courtroom monitor for the San Diego County High School Mock Trial Competition. And I actually ran into a colleague of Judge Zapanta's, a fellow judicial officer, a former bar president here in San Diego County, and now Judge Lillis McCoy. And I had mentioned to Judge McCoy that we would be recording a podcast today with Judge Zapanta. And Judge McCoy actually gave me her permission to quote her and how, her fellow judicial bench officer, how she perceived her. And she said to me, and it was just so succinct and perfect. She said, her work is visionary. Her work is visionary. And I said, absolutely. I certainly agree with Judge McCoy's sentiment and view of Judge Zapanta, indeed as a pillar of our community. And so with that said, now I'd like to turn the mic over and please ask Judge Rohani Zapanta to share a little bit about your background.
Well, thank you so much for that kind introduction. That's a very high bar there. I'm super humbled and honored from that quote of Judge McCoy's. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rohani Zapanta, and I'm a judicial officer with the San Diego Superior Court. I currently preside over cases involving mentally ill patients and mentally ill litigants in the conservatorship process. And so that's kind of the bulk of the work that I do. I also hear criminal cases involving adult delinquency as well. I got into the field of law, basically applied to law school, never thinking I'd ever actually be a lawyer. I didn't even think about law school until it was a joke between myself and another classmate who said, I'm thinking about applying to law school. And then that classmate a year ahead of me got accepted. And I thought to myself, that was the guy that I used to help tutor. And I thought to myself, for me, well, if he could get in, what about me? The thing is, I never thought of law and anyone in a very prestigious position professionally um, as part of my sphere. I grew up from a working class family. I'm the first in my college to graduate, first in my family to graduate from college, and also first, obviously, in my family to go to law school. I didn't know any lawyers growing up, knew of one person who was in community college when I was in elementary school, and that was a family friend. And that was a thing. I didn't even realize she was in community college and that there was a difference. I just knew that she was in college. So education wise, my social network at the time I was growing up, really were a blue collar working class families, and we were very traditional. I'm Filipino American. We're traditional in our core values and our belief set about hard work. Education is key, and also staying true to the values that raised us, in the integrity and the dignity of being a Filipino American.
Thank you for sharing that. And I do have, like I said, the privilege of knowing a little bit about your background. And I'm a paralegal educator, like my co-host Kelly, and I teach at the University of San Diego. And I learned in getting to know you that you actually got your undergrad through USD. You got your paralegal certificate, which was surprising to me. I didn't even know that. And you had told me, oh, I worked as a paralegal for 2 years before I went to law school and became
I did.
Yeah, so we wanted to kind of explore that a little bit because, like you said, you come from a family and a background that really didn't have lawyers or people in the law that were around you. So, that I'm assuming that that experience during college was really that really shaped kind of what your career would eventually look like. But if you could share kind of that experience a bit.
Sure. So as I would think it was a junior or almost late sophomore, junior year, my major was international relations. And then I was planning on doing some type of work since we're a border town with the borders. So I was minoring in Spanish. I'm fluent in Tagalog. And so I thought there are kind of some crossover in some words because of the Spanish influence in the Philippines. So I thought this would be a language. But as I got further and further into, I think it was Spanish 4 or 5, the conjugations, I really was having some struggling with that. And then I turned to, at the same time, my grandmother was falling very ill. And my grandmother doesn't speak any English. She actually lived with us for a good amount of time before she was hospitalized and in treatment. But I became the translator in a lot of other things, such as medical paperwork, decision making, her social security, a lot of her affairs, because she actually helped raise me, which is why I learned to speak Tagalog. My grandmother didn't ever go to school, so she never learned how to read or write. So there was even that other layer of interpretation and navigating that I really started to think about people and their ability to understand the law, to understand how to navigate the world and life in this country, and the importance of someone who actually understood at a deeper level what law is, that I decided to end my minor in Spanish, having a good foundation in Spanish, but then before I jumped feet first into law school, which was so foreign to me, I thought to take my hand at being a paralegal, to understand the mechanisms of a law office or a law firm and the bolts and nuts and bolts and the ins and outs of what needs to get processed in order for a case to really come into fruition, and then to really be able to observe an attorney at the forefront of litigation. And so I joined the paralegal program. I dropped my minor, used my scholarship, at the same time getting my undergrad to take on the paralegal certification. And I took those courses from 6 to 9 at night, worked part-time, and did my undergrad degree. So 12-hour, 16-hour days were a given to me, and it was a normal for me. But I loved it. And then I practiced as a paralegal my last semester of undergrad into my first and second year of law school.
Wow. Your journey from paralegal to judge, it's really inspiring. I mean, how do you believe that paralegal education programs can better prepare individuals for, careers in the legal profession, particularly in terms of understanding the complexities of law and fostering that commitment to justice that you so clearly, started with at a young age in your educational process?
Absolutely. Paralegal certification, well, I took mine at USD, so that it does also require that you do a certain number of practical hours, and then they place the student in, an assignment or internship to get those hours. And it may not necessarily be one that the student was hoping to be placed in, and that gives them that opportunity to work in different realms. So I never imagined myself working for a criminal defense attorney on the federal panel. And that's where I got placed. And the story is I got placed initially with more of a civil litigator who had an office next door to this criminal defense attorney. They had shared kind of an office boutique space. And he frankly told me he thought I was too nice of a girl to be in the field of law, and
Wow.
said, I don't know if I can really use you in my practice, but I do have an attorney next door who used to be a high school teacher, and maybe he could take you on for some work. And it just so happened that that attorney was in the middle of a very large case with, back then it wasn't digital, several boxes and reams of discovery that were bait stamped manually that I had to go through and organize and issue spot and assist the attorney in. And that began my love for the law, but it also trained me. So I went through thousands and thousands of pages as a paralegal, kind of taking careful instruction and touching base and checking in with my attorney on preparation for trial. Those skills, understanding a case from the outside in, and not just understanding it, but really being able to linearly imagine the logistics that are going to be required to really adequately prepare for trial, the organization needed, picturing it and actually putting it together, being able to easily access key information and saving precious time in the middle of trial, and being the one resource that knows the big picture at all times, is crucial in not just being a paralegal who's effective and really valuable, but also if you wanted to pursue the career of law and really approaching law as an attorney. And then also on the bench, understanding the mechanisms of case preparation and case organization.
And I wonder too, Judge Zapanta, when you were transitioning from that, your undergrad into your paralegal training, getting that legal knowledge and the, practical experience, and then going into law school and, finally becoming a lawyer and then judge, what were there moments in your career where you felt that shift, where you said, oh, yes, this is where I think I can make a greater difference? I wonder that and Kelly and I talk a lot about this, in terms of the matriculation of our students and what we hope for them and what we hope for their career trajectories and success. And we always tell them, you know what, the sky's the limit. You can do whatever you want with this legal training. It's just training for a different way of thinking and approaching things, So I wonder if you could share that, if there were moments in your career and your education that kind of stood out to
Sure.
you.
Yeah, there are clear moments. I know that one of the things that drew me further and further into developing my practice and my profession was the human element of the law. I mean, you can't automate litigation. There's emotion involved. Obviously we separate emotion from evidence, but we can't ignore that there are human beings and lives, and dreams at stake in every litigation, whether it be criminal or civil, or in my case, pseudo, in my courtroom. But I think that for me, I was the paralegal assisting in this large case involving a physician who was the defendant. And I remember oftentimes I'd be the first person he would sit down and give information to or provide documents to, so that I could then go through it and sort it through and then, present it to the team. But I remember distinctly, he began crying and he put his hands in his face, and talked about his family, his kids and his wife. And I stopped because we were going over things and he was explaining what the documents were. And I told him, I could really tell that you really love your wife and your kids. That's shown every time you've come here. I want to let you know that I've noticed that, and I respect you for the care that you have for your family. Then he says, I did this for my family. Everything I've done is for my family. And I think that's the difference. I think if students can think about what they bring, they're not these droids. They have these lived experiences like myself. I know the anguish of an immigrant family that wants to do everything for their family to really have these opportunities, and the desperation that they have when resources are low and options are limited. Especially because there could be, a language deficiency and a cultural disparity. So I would encourage students to really think about not just the skill set that they're learning, but the lived experience that they bring to the table, because that you can't teach. And also that you can't impart on just one type of person. It's unique to each one. And it's that lived experience that can be just invaluable to the workplace at any level of practice of law or any team in the law that you join.
Yeah, it's so true. And I mean, such an accurate statement about, how our experiences shape, sort of our future, and how we can utilize the resources throughout, our education and background, or our experiences in our background, to really impact not only ourselves, right, our own professional development, but those around us as well. So, one thing that really struck me was how you are a co-founder and co-chair of the California Judges Association Law Student Wellness Committee. And, I think this just goes hand in hand to see that impact you're making. So what was the catalyst to this project, and how do you envision it impacting the legal community?
I was at a National Association of Women Judges conference, and I attended this welcome reception, and there stood this amazing veteran judge who was Japanese American. She stood 4 foot, maybe 4'10", and and then the microphone wasn't working at this reception. Then she just boomed out in a very loud and commanding voice, very classy voice though, what she was there for. And at the time, she was the president of the California Judges Association. And she was talking about seeking newer judges' input on ways that the California Judges Association could address high alcohol abuse, suicide rate, and depression in law students. She named some facts about particularly Asian American female law students and the suicide rate, and how it really deeply affected her as an Asian American. And she was just putting herself out there as the president for these ideas. I had just come off of, I had just gotten appointed, I just came off of volunteering as a facilitator instructor for inmates on cognitive behavioral therapy and decision making through the restorative justice program. And part of what they did was, of the inmates who were the most broken down and lost and disassociated from their support network. They rebuilt these inmates and individuals up by rediscovering their core values and reintroducing them to their upbringing and how to identify their core values. And so what gave me this idea of creating workshops for law students on rebuilding their core values and being able to celebrate their foundation and their roots. I call it foundation because it's one that keeps a person stable in times of crises. I reconverted the concept into your personal constitution. As a law student and as a lawyer, as a practicing attorney, and law in general is evidence-based. And so we took the approach of your personal constitution being the core values by which you're raised and that which you understand and hold true for yourself throughout your life. And then kind of transitioning that and helping students use evidence-based practices to find out pieces of evidence in their life and their current circumstances to deal with crises and make decisions that are healthy and safe for them.
Wow.
That's fascinating. And actually, I'd like to, that's what the work that Judge McCoy was referring to, Judge Zaponte, is that her work is visionary. She had mentioned to me that she collaborated with you on this project. And so
That's
I wanted
right.
and I wanted to explore a little bit further about mental health and wellness. As you brought up, it is a big deal. It's a big issue in our profession. In fact, I think in May, the first week of May is Wellbeing in Law Week. And May is even Mental Health Awareness Month.
Yes.
And, you brought up the issue of suicide and suicide ideation being an issue within the legal community as well, because of the stresses and pressures that we may feel, with our cases that we handle. So as you mentioned that you created this personal constitution kind of mindset with the law students, but I wonder, how do you maintain balance in your own life, and how do you encourage that in your sphere of influence?
Well, I first of all have my own personal constitution, and that pretty much doesn't change. I understand, and I'm able to now, after a few years of being in this kind of work, I can now evidence-based wise kind of articulate what those are. And some are kind of concepts that we can't even put into English words. I was raised also in a very traditional Filipino household. And so one of them is kapwa, which is kind of a rough translation into like a connectedness with others. And so I interpret it as, I define myself as how I serve others. And oftentimes that gets kind of misconstrued. Some people see that, and some Asian cultures, especially in the law, they see that as, oh, that means, assimilating, or that means, deferring to the group and losing out on your self rights. But it's not that at all in my case, and my understanding how I was raised. It's actually understanding how I can contribute. And so that's kind of always been one of my big, Bill of Rights in my personal constitution that I kind of keep for myself. But the big thing I do, because it's always going to be hard. Nothing's ever easy, and you're going to have obviously worse days than others, and you're going to see and hear things. Obviously, I gave that example of this person who just put his hands in his face and didn't know me very well, but obviously is in the middle of an emotional crisis. I mean, litigation and law, obviously spurns from conflict. So that's a heavy burden to take on top of elite, articulate, erudite students and lawyers. I mean, we gravitate toward this field and the competitiveness. I mean, the field of law is competitive by nature. I deal with all of those pressures by really, I encourage everyone to really remind yourself of your why. And so to think about my why, things I do, I call home. Not to complain, but to really listen and kind of understand what's going on, and to kind of look at it from a dynamic of, okay, what's the big picture of where I'm from? And where are my values showing themselves in the way life is at my parents' house, for example, or one of my old childhood friends, and what's life like for them, and how are they raising their kids, and how are those values shown, and maybe why have I been still so closely connected to that person. My why reveals itself in evidence-based ways. And for people in the law, I encourage you to do the same. Use the same skills you use in court, in class, for your cases at work. Use the same skills, but really give yourself that credit and start looking at those bits and pieces of evidence. Pay attention to the language that your loved ones use with you, how they see you, what they actually tell you, what words they're choosing to describe you. And your why will reveal itself. And oftentimes when they do, when your whys reveal themselves, you find that stability, but more importantly, that strength to move forward and get through successfully.
I love that. I love how you frame it around, your connection to your foundation, whether that's, your family or any of these different things that really define your core values and who you are. And it's clear, you're exceptional in advocating for mental health awareness, not just for others, but also yourself, within the legal profession and beyond, right? So can you share with us some insights into how you believe we can foster this more supportive and holistic environment within the legal community?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's actually a skill that you can use for your clients at work, with your professors at school. It's an effective way of listening. Communication is key in law. And I often tell law students it's 50% talking, only 50%. The other 50% is listening. And there's advocacy in listening. So being an advocate for yourself in law and looking for those evidence-based things that help recognize your why, it's about paying attention and being able to listen. And doing that effectively is by acknowledging a person's feelings, acknowledging whether what they say makes you feel something, hearing them, really hearing them, in acknowledging their word choice and letting them know, oh, you've said this, that must mean, and I take that to mean this. Really engaging in a true conversation so that you're acknowledging the person's thoughts and emotions. And then, relating. So before you say, oh, well, I do this, really listen to them, think about what they're saying, acknowledge their word choice and any emotion they may be feeling, share with them what you are feeling and thinking about what they're saying, and then reply on how you might relate to what the topic is. That's true connection. And it's more authentic and real because you're actually engaging in a more meaningful way.
Those skills are incredible. And we refer to those, and Kelly and I actually have been we teach each other because we created this presentation called Developing Durable Skills, Professionalism and Ethics. And we have taken that presentation on the road. We have been asked to present that in Arizona, in Virginia, in Florida. And when you emphasize that part of us where, it may have been considered a soft skill in the past. And I think the new term is this durable skills, right? But the importance of that in representing your clients as a lawyer and, as a paralegal, and supporting your team in representing a client, and even as a judge in the judicial process, I can imagine that, because I know with your background that you actually came from juvenile court before you were handling these mental health cases. So I can just imagine what that skill set did for that population, for young folks, right? They're just as involved. Could you share a little bit about that and how that informed your process as a judge?
Yeah, absolutely. I was in juvenile court for 4 years. And so engaging with youth is similar approach, but a much different way of communicating. One of the key things I think that youth in the justice system, the juvenile justice system, have found themselves there is because I kind of phrase it as a sense of self is lost. And perhaps it's, their foundation isn't as clear for them. And they're still growing and learning, and so is their brain. Their brain is still growing and learning. I mean, science tells us that now. And so the law is also kind of trying to catch up to the science in that respect. But I do with youth, when I was as a judge in juvenile justice, I first acknowledge what the evidence shows that they've been able to accomplish, or what they've been able to communicate to adults, and any kind of self-control they've been able to exhibit. All these qualities that we want to encourage them to continue doing, either while in custody or out in the community, but not in these kind of fluffy ideas in the word cloud, but really pointing out things. So whether it be a student who actually met after school with his teacher, but asked to meet after school, I will pick up something like that in a report or something that someone says about that student and say, you know what, I see that you have initiative. You took it upon yourself to say, look, I think I need more help. I'm going to ask for it. One, it takes courage, because you're not thinking about what others will think about you, but this is what you need, and you know how to go ahead and get the help that you need. Two, you're not too proud to seek help because you don't know it all. That's a strength. That's a superpower. So these are, and that takes maturity. Not everyone your age has that maturity. So it really is not trying to build them up on these words that maybe they can't relate with, but I'm pointing out specific behavior and decisions they've made that they're familiar with because it's them. And I always tell them, I say, there's no fake people allowed in my courtroom, whether you're a grown-up, whether you're a youth. I said, the whole point is for you to be yourself and speak your truth. And I do try to find your truth in the evidence that's before me. And what's true here is you're showing maturity, you're showing initiative, and you're being responsible about seeking help. I think that's a much different delivery, in a way I think that can be more effective, but also one that I think can be more connected to a youth.
Well, I love how you touch on that, the difference of communicating to your audience, right? Like the different needs that the audience may have, and how you have to tune your message to the audience, right? So kind of looking through that lens of diversity and equity, in the judicial setting, what steps do you think can be taken to be more inclusive within our justice system to create that community and belonging, no matter what point in one's journey they are at?
I think that there are so many things that are being done now, just encouraging people to look into what's already being offered. I don't think this is like a novel concept. I think it's just different. It's packaged differently, maybe to be a little bit more digestible for those in the legal profession. But it's not a novel concept to be respectful and to honor the dignity of an individual, to celebrate someone's unique contributions because of their lived experience and maybe how that enhances their work performance. None of this is new. I think, though, the more we can be comfortable talking about it, and the more we can be comfortable having people feel safe enough to approach one another as their true and best selves, I think the professional legal environment can only be enriched and enhanced by that approach.
That is wonderful. And then before, we close out our conversation today, I kind of want to get, as educators and for our audience, what can we do as educators to kind of build those skills? Because we're so focused on like the substantive, right? We want to make sure you understand the law, how to apply the law and reasoning, right? Our IRAC memos, and we're teaching our students this, right? How to think like a legal professional. But there's more to it. From what I'm hearing in today's episode, it's really that authenticity and being true to yourself, not just, the way that we treat our clients and the folks around us, but in the way that we even handle our own, our own career and advancement in our lives. You say that mental health is really an important thing that we do need to talk about and address. So how, as educators, can we kind of incorporate that and embed that into our curriculum? And what kind of content do you recommend for us?
Well, I would encourage maybe the approach to be seen as, the law is evidence, but yet emotion. How are you able to foster a learning environment that teaches how to acknowledge emotion as well as incorporate understanding evidence? And so and that's across the board amongst any kind of lived experience, background, cultural difference, socioeconomic difference, right? Everyone feels. And so to be able to understand where that emotion plays in part with whatever's being taught, whether it be civil litigation, whether it be criminal, procedure, uh, there's going to be emotional pockets there or where emotion will reveal itself. And to be able to acknowledge to each of the students, that's where you're going to have to understand how to incorporate whatever the client's feeling or whatever the litigant's feeling. Also, pay attention to what the lawyer's feeling. As a paralegal, one of the things that the attorney I worked for, it was a male, he turned to me for kind of a quick, give me the big picture assessment, one. And then I would follow up with, okay, I think you need a breather, or I think it's time for a break. You've said that sentence 3 times, or I think we've been looking at the same thing and it's been an hour and a half. These are the things where people remember things more and they internalize things more when they feel something about it. And I think that's the key to really acknowledge. You can't set aside feelings because otherwise we could automate the law and we could easily touch screen stuff and spit out a ruling, but that's not how it works. And that's not how advocacy works either, obviously. So that would be my kind of 2 cents.
It rings a bell to me that sounds like empathetic compassion, right? And Christine and I both love Brene Brown, and that's, one of her high points. There's that empathetic compassion and how, our emotional intelligence and resilience, they all kind of develop together. So thank you, Judge Zapata, for shedding light on the power of education and advocacy, as well as the importance of mental health awareness in the legal community. Your inspiring journey and insights have certainly enriched our understanding of the importance of well-being. So to those who tuned in today, we appreciate you joining us on the 2nd episode of AFPE's Legal Luminaries. We hope Judge Zapanta's experiences have sparked some contemplation on the profound impact of cultivating wellness and self-advocacy within the legal community. For those eager to explore more, we've included relevant links in the show notes today. A special acknowledgement to Doug Lusk and his team at National Society for Legal Technology for their invaluable contributions to the post-production of this podcast. And as we wrap up, we want to leave you with another thought-provoking question. So if you did have 20 minutes to interview anyone, who would you choose to speak with? We encourage you to share your thoughts and suggestions with us. And thank you once again. We look forward to having you with us on the next episode of Legal Luminaries. Until then, keep forging those connections and building relationships that illuminate our legal landscape. Goodbye for now.